The sky rifts tear open one by one, and everyone around me throws in their most prized possessions, praying for a blessing. I'm broke, so I dig through my bag and find one half-warm can of soda. I toss it onto the rift without much hope. The crowd snickers. Just another nobody throwing trash at a god. Then the rift detonates with the deepest red light anyone has seen yet, and out of that light crawls a mythic-grade hatchling that has never once been reported online. All because I'm the only person on this planet who can read what these things actually want. A few hours ago I was still nobody. Still the guy whose girlfriend drained his savings account one withdrawal at a time. Mia took the rose gold watch I'd saved 4 months to buy her, climbed into a stranger's brand new convertible, and didn't even look back. I was standing on the corner watching taillights disappear when the sky above the city split down the middle like a dropped plate. A sound like the whole atmosphere clearing its throat rolled across the skyline, and then they came down. Rifts, dozens of them, hundreds, glowing wounds in the air that drifted to earth and rooted themselves into sidewalks, rooftops, parking garages, wherever they landed. The entire city went the color of a healing bruise, deep violet bleeding into orange. Pain stabbed through both my eyes at once, so sharp I dropped to one knee on the pavement. When I opened them again there was writing hanging in the air above the nearest rift. Writing nobody else could see. Rift 888. Bound coordinate, the frozen maw. An ancient WM who has devoured continents lies coiled there, sick to its marrow of gold, sick of silk, sick of the taste of centuries. It wants one thing now, and it wants it badly, something that bites back. Something cold enough to sting and sharp enough to wake a dead tongue. A crowd is already forming. A heavy-set man steps up first, tosses in a paper bag of dinner rolls because it's the only thing in his backpack. The rift answers with a soft white bloom of light, and out floats a single glowing apple. He eats it without hesitating, and his whole silhouette changes in front of us, fat melting off him like wax, shoulders squaring, jaw sharpening. The crowd loses its mind. People start emptying purses, pulling off jewelry, dragging wallets out of back pockets and hurling everything they own at the nearest glowing wound in the sky. I watch all of it and have to bite down on a laugh, because only I can see what this particular rift actually wants, and it isn't gold. It's a taste shock. And in the bottom of my backpack, wedged behind a phone charger I never use, there's a can of the nuclear ghost pepper energy drink my roommate dared me to finish last year. One sip put my tongue out of commission for 2 days. If a stale bread roll buys a transformation apple, what does the literal definition of bites back buy? I don't wait around to find out on the spot. I run home instead, because the smarter play is obvious. Don't perform the miracle in front of 300 witnesses. I dig through every drawer until I find the can, wedged behind a phone charger and a half-used tube of toothpaste. Then, instead of sprinting back out, I sit down at my laptop, because the internet is already on fire and I want to know exactly what kind of fire I'm dealing with before I throw myself into it. Every headline says the same word. A logistics tycoon backed a truck up to the rift outside his warehouse and unloaded literal pallets of bullion. The light that answered him was a calm, steady blue, and what came out was a seed that pulsed like it had its own pulse. He swallowed it on camera, and 20 minutes later he was growing thorned vines out of his palms strong enough to crush a car door. Other stories aren't so lucky. A collector overseas offered an heirloom blade to a rift near his estate, and what answered wasn't a blessing. It was a thing wrapped in smoke and teeth that leveled 3 blocks before the military managed to put it down. Casualties in the dozens. So a wrong offering doesn't just waste your turn. It can kill you and everyone standing near you. That single fact rearranges everything. Giving each rift exactly what it's starving for isn't a nice bonus. It's the whole game. My phone buzzes hard enough to walk itself off the table. A national emergency alert, blunt and official. Initial findings on the anomalous rifts. Each person may offer to a single rift only once, and is limited to 3 total offerings per 24 hours. The same atmospheric event that opened the rifts has also fried every camera, doorbell, and satellite dish on the planet. No footage. No witnesses except whoever happens to be standing there. My pulse does something complicated. This isn't a disaster. This is the first fair fight I've ever been handed. I check the clock, almost 10 at night, shove the soda can into my jacket, and head back out into a city that's already forgotten how to be quiet. The plaza where the breadroll rift stood is empty now except for trampled wrapping paper and a few abandoned offerings nobody bothered to retrieve. I find a patch of shadow, pull the can out, and set it gently on the rim of the rift the way you'd set down something fragile. The reaction isn't gentle at all. A red beam detonates straight up into the clouds, so bright it paints the underside of the whole sky the color of a struck match. People blocks away are going to be asking each other what that was for weeks. Out of the light, something heavy drops onto the pavement in front of me, black as a held breath, the size of a beach ball, faintly warm to the touch even from a foot away. An egg. I scoop it up before the light fully fades and I'm gone, half jogging, half sprinting, cradling something that might be the single most illegal thing currently on the continent. I don't know it yet, but 300 miles away, inside a windowless command floor that doesn't officially exist, the alarm is screaming. A man with a face like a closed door barks a single question at the room. Do we have a fix on that light? Someone answers fast. General, the bloom traced to the western industrial corridor of Wraithmore City. We've narrowed it to roughly 4 blocks. Designated a Tier 1 anomaly zone immediately. I want eyes on that location before the hour's out. By the time those orders are being relayed down a chain of command I've never heard of, I'm already 2 streets from home, breathing hard, staring down at the thing in my arms like it might start arguing with me. What exactly am I supposed to do with a giant black egg? I can't exactly scramble it for breakfast. Then letters crawl across the shell on their own, the same ghostly script I saw above the rift. Cinderfang egg. Grade, mythic. Once hatched, bonds permanently to its first feeder. Power-rivaling old god sleeps inside this shell. I actually laugh out loud in my empty stairwell. Anybody who spent 5 minutes in a game knows Mythic sits at the top of every list there is. The Ghost Pepper Soda really did not let me down. Then a second realization lands harder than the first. Why can my eyes read item descriptions too? The rift only promised me coordinates and cravings. I lock myself in the bathroom and stare into the mirror until words finally surface across my own reflection. Wormsite. Grade, unique. Lets the bearer perceive cause and effect bound to rifts and rift-born items. Gaze upon a rift to learn its bound coordinate and required offering. Gaze upon any rift-born object to learn its grade, name, and function. So that's the whole shape of it. I never imagined a pair of eyes could carry that much weight. I think back to the forum threads I skimmed an hour ago, hundreds of people walking away from rifts with a chunk of driftwood or a perfectly ordinary stone, no idea what either thing actually did, tossing them in the trash on the way home because nothing about them looked special. I'm not going to make that mistake. One glance and nothing stays hidden from me. Treasure hunting just stopped being a hobby and became a career. I tuck the egg into my bed like it's a sleeping pet and check the wall clock. 10:30. An hour and a half until the system resets at midnight, and I've still got 2 offerings left today. I start packing. A lighter, a tube of menthol bomb, a battered paperback on Stoic philosophy I never finished, things most people would call clutter. I throw all of it in. Last, almost as an afterthought, I slide a kitchen knife into the side pocket. Self-defense? Probably. Hopefully. My eyes land on a framed photo on the desk. Mia, mid-laugh, sunlight in her hair, a version of her I used to think was the whole truth. Keeping it around serves zero purpose now. I shove it into my jacket pocket, meaning to toss it in the first bin I pass. I head out toward the abandoned industrial corridor on the west side, empty for years, full of dead-end alleys and collapsed loading docks, exactly the kind of terrain nobody else will think to search tonight. Halfway there my phone lights up. Mia's name on the screen. I let it ring twice just to confirm it's really her, then hang up, block the number, and delete the contact in one motion. She's calling from inside a hotel bar across town, sitting 2 seats from a man named Reese who can apparently produce a 5-figure wristwatch from his jacket the way other people produce a stick of gum. She assumed I was still hunched in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. She did not assume I'd hang up on her. A flare of pure, undiluted offense goes through her. What's wrong, babe? Reese asks, sliding an arm along the back of her chair, and just like that her irritation evaporates, because look at him. Look at what he can casually pull out of a pocket. These men are the new offerings, the new currency, and after her last 3 riffs answered her in a soft, soul-stirring green light, she started to suspect she might just be one of fate's favorites. Reese watches her with something that looks like interest but reads, underneath, like arithmetic. He only meant to burn an evening's worth of cash on a curiosity. He didn't expect her luck to be this absurd. 3 riffs. 3 green lights in a row. Keeping a woman like that around might be useful later. I have no idea any of that is happening. I'm already deep in the industrial corridor, scanning for the telltale shimmer of a rift before the clock runs out on me. The first one I find is barely worth the walk. Rift 2591, bound to a junk realm where a scrap-collecting little machine spirit hoards nothing but bottle caps. I keep moving. The second is a dried-up pond where some kind of water elemental just wants a single mouthful of clean water. Sentimental? Sure, but I'm not in the business of sentiment tonight. I push deeper into the alleys until a third rift catches my eye, half buried under torn cardboard. Rift 444. Bound coordinate, the drowned stage. A leading lady, cursed to repeat the same tragedy on an endless loop, has grown sick to death of her own script. She wants something forged from a real betrayal, something soaked all the way through with hatred that actually happened. My breath catches. I just got dumped this morning. I reach into my jacket and pull out Mia's photo. My hand finds the lighter before my head even finishes the thought. I run the flame along one corner until it curls and blackens, and while it burns I let myself remember on purpose. The nights she canceled on me for better invitations. The gaming account she sold behind my back because, in her words, men who play games are wasting their lives. The watch I saved 4 months for, gone in one car ride. We were never built for the same life, she told me, the last time we spoke as a couple. Please stop bothering me. By the time the memory finishes playing I'm smiling, and it isn't a nice smile. I drop the scorched photo onto the rift. The beam that answers is a deep violet, quieter than the red but something the news hasn't reported yet, which means it matters. A small thrill runs through me anyway. 5 worn paper stubs appear, hovering, and I close my fist around them. Memory brand, Act 4. Grade, epic, one-time use, part of a set. When used, forces the target to relive their single worst memory in full. Their mind locks up for 3 full seconds, leaving them defenseless. Not as flashy as a dragon egg, but 3 seconds of total paralysis is the difference between living and dying in any real fight. And the words, part of a set, snag in my brain like a hook. What happens if I ever collect the rest? No time to chase that thread tonight. Half an hour left. I search until I find a deep, blocky factory floor at the edge of the district, and inside it a single low-numbered rift glowing faint and steady. Rift 10, and the second I see the digits I realize it isn't decimal at all. It's binary. The text that follows confirms it. Bound coordinate, the recursion vault. A vast machine intelligence teetering on the edge of true self-awareness has solved every form of reasoning except one paradox it cannot let go of. Why thinking creatures waste time pondering questions that don't improve their odds of survival. It wants a sample of exactly that kind of useless wisdom. I know immediately. I pull the battered stoic paperback out of my bag and set it gently in the center of the rift. The reaction isn't gentle at all. A screech like a dial-up modem dying, the smell of fried circuitry filling the empty factory floor. For one panicked second I think I just lobotomized whatever lives down there. Then a column of pure gold light erupts toward the ceiling and blows straight through the broken skylights into the open sky. 3 colors in one night. Red, violet, gold, none of which the forums have mentioned yet. And that's exactly when the temperature behind me drops 10 degrees in half a second. The flash of gold gives me just enough light to catch the shape of someone closing the distance at a dead sprint, blade already raised. I don't have time to think, only to react, and the only card in my hand is the one I just earned. I burn the memory brand without a second thought. The attacker's whole body locks mid-stride like someone hit pause on him, and a raw, ugly sound tears out of his throat as whatever memory just replayed itself behind his eyes finishes wrecking him from the inside. His knife clatters across the concrete. I close the gap, and it's over fast, faster than I expect, faster than feels real. I'm shaking against a support beam a minute later, because it's the first time I've ever killed anyone, and my body apparently has opinions about that regardless of what my brain decided was necessary. I throw up everything I ate today. Then I force myself upright, because a column of gold light is a beacon, and beacons attract things that hunt. 2 pale orbs of light hover above the body when I look back. Wormsight picks them apart instantly. Striderweave anklets. Grade, common. Slight boost to movement and jump height. Unbound. Ember charm. Grade, common. Slight boost to physical stamina. Unbound. A cold understanding settles over me as I read those 2 lines. There's an unspoken rule under all of this, and it just wrote itself across my evening. Take down a rival, and whatever they've earned becomes yours. This man had 2 working items on him already, which means tonight wasn't his first hunt. And yet every headline I read on the way here talked about blessings and rewards, and not one of them mentioned that someone might be murdered for theirs. It isn't that nobody knows. It's that everyone who knows has decided silence serves them better. The predators because exposure ends the hunting season, the prey because admitting it invites a target onto their own back, and the people in charge because saying it out loud is the same as announcing that the old order has already collapsed. I pocket the orbs and turn toward the center of the rift, where a fist-sized metal cube sits waiting, humming faintly. Horde Pocket. Grade, Legendary. Once bonded, grants the user a private storage dimension with an initial capacity of 1,000 cubic meters. Items can be deposited or withdrawn by thought alone. I think instantly of the egg sitting on my bed. The second my fingers close around the cube, a vast quiet space opens up somewhere behind my own ribs, like discovering a second lung. I drop the memory brand stubs into it just to test the sensation, and they vanish without a sound. I check my phone, just past midnight, and sheath the bloody knife, ready to disappear into the dark. 2 steps from the building, lightning splits the sky in half and the clouds open up. 5 minutes ago it was clear enough to count stars. Now it's pouring, and something about the rain feels deliberately wrong. I freeze under the eave of the loading dock, unwilling to take the risk of finding out the hard way whether getting wet does something worse than ruin my jacket. I check my phone instead and the forums confirm my instinct. Half the posts from the last 10 minutes are some version of "Is it raining where you are too?" and "Don't let it touch you," and "I got rained on, please don't let me turn into something." Before I can settle on a plan, a flagged post jumps the queue. The rift in my own neighborhood, gone. Not dimmed, not depleted. Gone, like it was never bolted to the world in the first place. I turn around fast enough to nearly slip on wet concrete, and sure enough, the factory floor behind me is empty. No glow, no rift, and, more unsettling, no body. I'm certain nobody else has been here. Which leaves exactly one explanation: the rain itself does this. When it falls, rifts disappear, and along with them every trace of whatever happened the day before. Combined with every camera on the planet already being fried, this storm is, functionally, the most perfect crime scene eraser anyone could design on purpose. Since the rain doesn't seem to be doing anything to me directly, I pull my hood up and walk the rest of the way home through it. Not long after I leave, 3 black SUVs roll up to that same empty factory floor. A woman in her 20s steps out behind the man giving orders, closes her eyes, and reaches for something the rest of us can't see: a residual sense for leftover rift energy, freshly earned from her own offering the day before. The higher the grade, the clearer the echo. She gasps, stumbles, has to be caught by the man beside her. "This is nothing like the last scene I read," she says, voice unsteady. "That one barely registered like a firefly. This is bright as noon." "Could it be gold tier?" someone behind her asks, and the man in charge goes very still. "Lock this whole sector down," he orders. "Full sweep, full report, and tell command I think we're dealing with something this city has never seen before." Meanwhile, I make it home, soaked through, and the first thing I do is settle the egg deeper into the blankets like it might catch a chill. If the hatched dragon turns out to fit inside the Horde Pocket too, that would solve a lot of future problems. But first I need to figure out how to hatch the thing at all. I remember every fantasy movie I've ever half-watched and go with the obvious play: a blood bond. I prick my finger and let one drop fall onto the shell. Faint text crawls across the surface in response. Hatching condition: requires a sustained intake of vital essence. About what I expected, and also a problem, because my own blood supply is not an infinite resource. That's a tomorrow problem. Today has already used up every spare ounce of adrenaline I own, and I'm asleep before I finish the thought. At 5 in the morning, a siren tears through my skull and drags me upright. The rifts have refreshed, for real this time. I check my phone and the early conclusions are already trending. The pre-dawn rain does no physical harm, stops cold at 5 a.m. sharp, and the rifts reset the instant it does. I head out for breakfast with one ear on the forums, half-formed plans about where to find a steady source of vital essence rattling around my skull. I order something cheap at a corner diner and end up eavesdropping, completely by accident, on the 2 men in the booth behind me. "Look at all these people losing their minds over rifts," one of them mutters, voice pitched low. "Throwing in heirlooms like degenerate gamblers. They've all forgotten one thing." "What's more important than rifts right now?" the other one asks. "People still have to eat," the first one says. "Food and drink never go out of style. I'm looking at a beverage bottling plant going for next to nothing right now. Once these rift addicts burn through their savings and come crawling back for a cold drink, I'm going to own every tap in this city." Lightning goes off behind my eyes that has nothing to do with the weather. A bottling plant means syrup lines, carbonation tanks, sugar storage by the ton, liquid, refined, easy to feed in bulk. If a dragon egg runs on vital essence, and the cheapest, most plentiful concentrated essence-adjacent substance in this entire city happens to be sitting in industrial vats somewhere, then my supply problem just solved itself. I'm home and scrolling listings within the hour. The rifts have tanked half the commercial real estate market overnight, and sure enough, one listing jumps out immediately. A small independent bottling plant on the western edge of town, urgent sale, price negotiable, no questions about why. I call before I let myself second-guess it. 2 p.m. the next day, I'm standing in the loading yard of Halloway Bottling, looking at conveyor belts that haven't moved in a week. A middle-aged man named Halloway comes out to meet me, already talking before he's fully through the door. New CO2 lines installed last spring, he says, walk-in cooling at full capacity. This place could be running again inside a month under the right owner. I don't say much. My silence makes him nervous, which works in my favor. By the time we're done negotiating, I've bought the entire property for less than half his opening number. He signs, hands over the keys, and throws in the contact for a regional sugar distributor as a goodwill gesture, which, unknown to him, solves my second supply problem before I even know I have it. I walk the building alone once he's gone. Storage room, bottling floor, the walk-in cooler humming on backup power. Then I find a service door set into the floor of the old syrup cellar, half hidden under a stack of pallets. The second I crack it open, worm sight flares behind my eyes on its own, picking up a faint pulse of energy from somewhere below. I brush away a decade of dust and find a rift sitting at the bottom of the stairs, glowing a slow, deep amber, the air around it smelling faintly of caramelized sugar and something underneath that like old copper. I force my breathing steady and read it. Rift 40. Bound coordinate, the amber hollow. All sweetness becomes tribute here, until the crowned thirst is finally satisfied. Trait 1. Eternal Rift. This binding does not expire and does not count against the daily offering limit. Unlimited offerings permitted. Trait 2. The Fizzing Hollow. Any rift reward item may be fed here and refined into nectar. Absorbing it grants a permanent boost to overall vitality. My head goes a little light reading that. This is the lowest rift number I've encountered, and it's permanent, with no daily cap, sitting directly underneath property I now legally own. Every mediocre reward I pick up from now on has a second life as raw fuel for my own body. I happen to have one mediocre reward already in my pocket. I drop the ember charm into the center of the rift, and a small glass bottle materializes, half filled with a fizzing amber liquid that looks unsettlingly like the world's most expensive soda. Wormsight confirms it. Nectar, common grade. Once absorbed, grants a slight permanent increase to overall vitality. I brace for something foul. Instead it's sweet, crisp, almost painfully refreshing, like the best soda I've ever had crossed with electricity. Heat blooms outward from my chest a second after I swallow it, every cell in my body lighting up at once. Steam actually rises off my skin. I walk over to an old shipping crate stacked against the wall and shove it without thinking. It goes skidding 15 feet across the concrete like it weighs nothing. That's from one bottle of the weakest possible grade. Becoming something close to unstoppable might not be the fantasy I assumed it was. I push the excitement down and refocus. Tomorrow I'll figure out how to feed the egg directly. Tonight, I need to keep collecting the items everyone else is throwing away, because countless people have already spent fortunes chasing the wrong rifts and walked off with garbage they don't understand. Those rejects are exactly my target. Gambling is risky. Picking up what other people throw out is not. That evening I make contact with the sugar distributor, only to run into the obvious obstacle. Buying in bulk costs money, and the plant purchase emptied my account. The new world has rewritten the rules of everything except currency, apparently. So before committing to a supply run, I decide to spend the evening scavenging, see what falls into my lap for free. Just past the wet market, a scream rips through the crowd ahead of me. A hunched, robed figure with too many joints is tearing into a fleeing vendor. I read it on instinct. The famished pilgrim. Calamity, common grade. Once a temple keeper, falsely accused of theft and beaten to death for it. Hates anyone connected to sweetness and excess. A failed offering summoned this thing. It clicks instantly. Somebody offered candy or sugar to the wrong rift and walked straight into this. Before I can decide whether to get involved, 3 black SUVs scream into the lot and disgorge a small army. At the front is a hard-faced man barking orders, and behind him a woman with her eyes already closed, sensing. "Commander, the energy here is strong," she says. "Be careful." I press myself into the shadow of a delivery truck and watch. Gunfire does nothing to the pilgrim. Bullets just spark off whatever's left of its hide. Two operatives break formation and flank it at a dead sprint, one burying a blade in the base of its skull, the other crushing its knee with an iron bar. The commander finishes it himself, a blade crackling with current taking the head clean off in one stroke. I watch their coordination and feel something cold settle in my gut. The distance between where I am tonight and where they already are is enormous. I need to close that gap fast, or I'm going to be the next thing they find lying on the pavement. I move on before anyone clocks me, working my way toward the quieter edge of the district as the sun goes down. Along the way I pass rift after rift that simply isn't worth my time. A clockwork rift bound to some eternally precise realm that craves change but offers nothing I can physically hand over, a silk-spun rift belonging to a grieving creature that wants a lullaby I don't know how to sing. Two dead ends in a row start to fray my patience. Then, near an abandoned bus shelter, a faint glow catches my eye, a rift built entirely out of bent and rusted vending machine parts, somehow more pathetic and more haunting than anything else I've seen tonight. I read it. Rift 2333. Bound coordinate, the last corner. A small mechanical vendor, stripped down to its frame, sold out its final product decades ago and has been waiting on this corner ever since for a customer who never came back. It does not understand why no one needs what it's selling anymore. The fairy tale ache of that description actually stops me for a second. Even the stories we tell children have apparently become real coordinates somewhere. I dig the lighter out of my bag, set it gently in the offering slot, and say, mostly to myself, the world moved on, old friend, but maybe this still warms somebody's hands tonight. The rift answers with a low mechanical hum and a violet beam, the same rare color from last night. A palm-sized tin box floats up out of the wreckage and I grab it before it can drift away. Vending tin of small mercies. Grade, epic. Dispenses 5 sparks of warmth automatically every day at 5 a.m. I'm quiet for a second after reading that. An epic grade item that produces 5 lighter-sized matches a day feels underwhelming on its face. Out of curiosity, I check one of the sparks individually. Spark of warmth. Grade, common. Burns hot and steady. Resistant to wind and water. Deals bonus damage to calamity grade targets. Bonus damage against calamities is genuinely useful information to file away. But 5 a day still feels thin, until a far more interesting thought arrives right behind it. These are common grade items. If I feed all 5 to the fizzing hollow every single morning, doesn't that mean 5 free bottles of nectar a day, forever, for doing absolutely nothing? I don't even finish the thought before I'm already moving, sprinting the whole way back to the bottling plant to test it. 20 minutes later I'm standing over the rift again, holding my breath as I drop 1 spark in. A small amber bottle materializes exactly like before. It worked. I feed the rest through and drink all 5 on the spot, my whole body running hot, bones and blood readjusting to the new baseline. When I finally settle, I check the time, 2 hours left until midnight, 2 offerings still unused. I think back to the clockwork rift from earlier. Low number, time-based theme, which usually means a heavy reward, but what offering could possibly represent time to something that already understands it perfectly? I look around my own apartment for inspiration and my eyes land on an old desk calendar, the one my father kept on his desk before he died. I've never had the heart to throw it out. It's covered in his handwriting, a circle drawn around the day of the accident that took both my parents, the day Mia and I started dating, her birthday, rent due dates, a coworker's wedding, good days tangled up with bad ones, no order to any of it. Standing there, the idea clicks into place. A perfect clock has no story. This calendar is nothing but story, messy, contradictory, alive in a way precision never is. What that rift actually wants isn't a better mechanism. It wants proof that imperfect time means something. I carry the calendar across the district and set it down at the center of the clockwork rift with something close to reverence. A flawless clock has no life in it, I tell it. This one is full of mistakes, and that's exactly why it was ever worth living through. Do you want to feel that for once? The calendar dissolves the second I finish speaking. Everything around me goes utterly silent, then gold light detonates outward hard enough to rattle the rusted shelter walls. Flashes of 1,000 strangers' lives flicker past my vision like a film reel running too fast, and at the center of it all, an antique pocket watch solidifies in the air. Hourglass of the Vigilant. Grade, legendary. Passive, grants the wearer extreme sensitivity to incoming change. Reaction time and threat perception are pushed far beyond normal human limits. I frown at it at first. Raw power sounds more useful on paper than awareness does. The instant my fingers close around it, though, I understand exactly how wrong that instinct was. This isn't about hitting harder. It's about never being late to react again. I tuck it into the hoard pocket immediately, half expecting the bond to weaken with distance. It doesn't. The world stays exactly as sharp as it was a second ago. One offering left, less than an hour until reset. I sweep the rest of the district and come up nearly empty. A swamp full of oversized insects, a junk heap nobody sane would bother with, until raised voices drift toward me from an old storage yard. I creep closer and find two groups squared off around a rift glowing soft rose gold, shaped vaguely like an open palm. Rift 9269. Bound coordinate, the Velvet Court. A queen who has fought through every kind of pleasure imaginable and felt nothing in centuries wants one sensation strong enough to actually reach her. I check my bag out of habit and remember exactly what's still rattling around in there. The same ghost pepper energy drink's twin, a second can I never opened, plus the tube of menthol bomb. A sensation strong enough to actually land. That tracks. Before I can step forward, the standoff in front of me turns violent. A heavy-set man dripping in gold chains is backed by more than a dozen men. Across from him stands a single sharp-eyed woman flanked by three others. "You stole from my crew," the big man snarls. "Hand it back and maybe I let you walk." The woman doesn't blink. "Get lost," she says, and the fight detonates instantly. Her people are skilled but outnumbered, and within minutes most of them are down. Cornered against a shipping container, the woman's expression shifts from defiant to something colder. "All of you die," she says, and crushes something small in her fist. Black mist floods the yard, and out of it rises a creature 3 meters tall, all claws and wrong angles. The gold chain crew freezes. Then the creature turns on the closest person to it, not an enemy, one of the woman's own allies, and tears him apart without hesitation. Chaos detonates across the yard. I watch from the shadows as the monster grinds through both sides indiscriminately, the woman herself shrinking behind a pillar, clearly not having planned for her own summon to be quite this indiscriminate. I check the time. Less than 10 minutes until my last offering of the day is wasted. I can't afford to wait this out. I take a breath, channel everything the nectar's given me, and break cover at a dead sprint, straight at the woman hiding behind the pillar. She senses me coming and doesn't run. She pivots and thrusts a blade at my chest from an angle that would have ended the old version of me instantly. With the hourglass running, though, the strike looks almost lazy. I read her shoulder shift before the blade even commits, slide past it, and open a line across both her forearms before she can recover. Her weapon clatters away. "Please," she gasps, hands raised uselessly, "we can talk, have mercy." I don't. Once it starts, it finishes. I drive forward for the killing strike, and at the very last instant her body detonates into a fine red mist with an audible pop, leaving my blade cutting empty air. By the time the mist clears, she's gone without a trace. I stand there blinking. She didn't die. She escaped, somehow, in a way I've never even heard rumored. I make a mental note that this world apparently runs deeper than I assumed. Right as a roar yanks my attention sideways, the 3-meter monster has noticed me. It's slow compared to what the hourglass lets me see. I duck under one swipe, open a gash along its leg with the kitchen knife, and spend the next several exchanges peeling it down layer by layer until Wormsight flags a weak point glowing faintly at the base of its skull. I use the borrowed speed from the anklets I looted last night to close the distance and drive the blade home with everything I've got. It drops. I don't waste the moment. I pull the egg out of the hoard pocket and set it down beside the body. "Dinner time," I tell it, and the pool of blood around the corpse visibly recedes, drawn into the shell at a pace fast enough to watch. Faint text flickers across the surface. "Hatching progress, 2%. My chest goes tight with something close to relief. The strategy works. I leave the egg to finish feeding while I sweep the rest of the lot, picking up a handful of unremarkable orbs off the other bodies and pocketing them for later conversion. With everything cleared, I turn at last to the rose gold rift still glowing patiently in the corner of the yard. Craving something strong enough to land, I tell it, pulling the ghost pepper can and the tube of menthol bomb from my bag and setting both down together. "Fire and ice, your choice." The rift answers with a column of violet light, intense enough that I brace for something higher. It doesn't escalate. Looks like even a queen who's felt nothing in centuries has standards I apparently haven't cleared. But the light doesn't fade the way it should. Instead it gathers itself into a shape, a figure stepping slowly out of the violet glow. A woman, impossibly composed, 2 small curling horns at her temples, a tail with a heart-shaped tip swaying behind her. "Mortal," she says, voice doing something unfair to my pulse, "you've pleased me. Name your wish." I genuinely do not get a chance to answer, because the egg at my feet picks that exact moment to shudder violently. A pull like gravity gone wrong rips outward from the shell, and the half-formed queen freezes mid-sentence, an expression crossing her face that can only be described as recognizing her own death a half-second too late. The pull drags her in before either of us can react, and she dissolves into violet light and vanishes entirely into the egg. Dead silence. I stand there staring at the empty space where a wish-granting demon used to be. The egg lets out something that can only be described as a satisfied little burp and floats lazily back up into my arms. Hatching progress, 41%. A handful of tiny heart-shaped markings have appeared along the shell, faintly violet. I poke it mostly out of spite. You'd better hatch into something that makes up for that, I tell it, and somewhere behind me thunder cracks the sky open. The gray rain starts right on schedule, and within seconds every trace of tonight's fight dissolves off the pavement like it was never there. I get under cover and replay the woman's escape in my head the whole walk home. That kind of trick doesn't belong to anyone I've met so far. Whoever she is, she's still out there, and something tells me this isn't the last time our paths cross. By the time I get back to the bottling plant, my injuries are minor and my excitement isn't. I drop the looted Striderweave anklets into the fizzing hollow first, and a fresh bottle of nectar rises up to meet the offering. Nectar, uncommon grade. Once absorbed, significantly increases overall vitality. Significantly is doing a lot of work in that sentence, and I down it without hesitating. Heat floods through me harder than the common grade bottle did, my bones and the bruises from tonight's fight knitting themselves back together at a pace that has no business being legal. By the time the rush settles, most of the damage is gone. The next morning, I wake up nearly fully healed. I feed the day's first batch of 5 sparks through the hollow, drink the results, and call the sugar distributor to place the largest order my new bank balance can stomach. A truck shows up a few hours later loaded with raw syrup concentrate and pallets of carbonation canisters. I spend the rest of the morning running the bottling line myself, learning the machine by trial and error, feeding the surplus product straight into the rift below instead of selling a drop of it. By midday the egg stirs for the first time. A hairline crack splits the shell, and something small and fuzzy with a familiar heart-shaped tip pokes out for half a second before retreating. I stare at it for a long moment. Didn't that demon I devoured last night also have a tail like that? Well, I tell the shell, you'd better hatch into something worth the trouble. I check the forums while the line runs and immediately wish I hadn't. The top post isn't about rifts or hatchlings at all. It's a man weeping into a camera over an empty offering box, his life savings gone for a single worthless wooden stick. The crowd around him is jeering instead of helping. I trace the rift that ruined him with worm sight out of morbid curiosity. Rift 17,626. Bound coordinate, the Hoarder's Vault. A goblin collector, long since bored of gold and jewels, only wants the most advanced piece of human engineering it's never seen before. The man bet his entire savings on a gold-tier jewel and handed it to something that only cares about circuit boards. The outcome was written the moment he chose the wrong rift. I feel nothing watching the crowd mock him for it, until a sharp, theatrical voice cuts through the noise. Hold on, the voice says, and a striking woman steps into the circle, soaking up the attention like sunlight. It's Mia. She looks the ruined man up and down, then offers him a deal. Follow her, gamble on her behalf, and she'll keep him fed while he keeps offering on her dime. The crowd murmurs, confused by the role reversal, until 2 men nearby explain it loud enough for everyone to hear. This is called farming. People with daily offering limits but no capital get scooped up by people with capital but no limits left to spend. Win something good, you eat well for a week. Win nothing, you get used up and discarded. They call it being a human slot machine. I listen to the whole exchange without much reaction. Other people's misfortunes aren't my problem tonight. I turn to leave and a voice behind me stops cold in its tracks. I recognize the voice before I even turn around. I don't answer, and I don't stop walking. Stop, Mia snaps, louder, are you deaf? Bodyguards in matching black jackets surround me before I can take 3 more steps, and I'm forced to turn. She looks me over with an expression somewhere between triumph and contempt. Climbed your way into an underground crew already, I see, I almost say, but don't bother. You blocked me, she says instead, and then couldn't help yourself and came running. Pathetic. The crowd laughs on cue. My stomach is too busy growling to care about any of this. I have 0 patience left for performance art. Seeing my blank expression only sets her off worse. She kicks off one heel theatrically and peels a stocking down to her ankle in front of everyone. You want me to feel sorry for you, she announces, loud enough for the whole street. Get on your knees and I'll toss you enough to eat for a week. The crowd eats it up. I'm only thinking about the food stall 2 blocks away. She mistakes my silence for hesitation and snaps for real this time. Get down. The slap I deliver lands before she finishes the sentence, hard enough to drop her flat onto the pavement. Her bodyguards rush me a half second later and go down just as fast, 3 dull thuds and a chorus of pained groans. I look down at her once, say nothing, and walk away while the entire crowd stands frozen. Somewhere in that same crowd, a man quietly pulls out his phone. Target Magpie just had a public altercation, he reports into it. Looks like an ex. The man's clearly trained, took down her security like it was nothing. Inside a command center I have no idea exists, the man in charge hears the report and shrugs it off as a minor scuffle. But a young analyst nearby goes very still, staring at the blurry photo attached to the file. Something about him feels familiar, she murmurs, though she can't place why. I caught a trace of his signature near the Pilgrim incident, she adds, frowning. I thought it was leftover residue. It wasn't. The commander's eyes sharpen at that. Run a full background check on the ex-boyfriend, he orders. Anyone who can flatten trained security without breaking stride has gotten real power from somewhere. None of that reaches me. I'm already 3 blocks away, sitting down at the same open-air food stall I always go to, finally about to eat something that isn't adrenaline. While I wait on my order, a man in his 40s shuffles between tables clutching a worn bag, working up the nerve to approach a group of off-duty soldiers drinking nearby. Gentlemen, he says, please, I pulled a blue-tier item yesterday and I don't know what it does. He produces a tarnished glass jar from the bag. The soldiers turn it over a few times, hold it up to the light, find nothing. One of them barks a laugh and offers him an insulting fraction of what blue tier should be worth, more out of pity than respect. The man tries to explain himself and gets talked over. I watch from my seat, worm sight catching on the jar without me even meaning to look. Vessel of hush. Grade, uncommon. Can contain and hold the gray rain. I nearly choke on my drink. That rain strips every ability from anyone it touches and erases evidence on contact. A container for it isn't a curiosity. It's a weapon. I wave the man over before the soldiers can talk him down any lower. His name is Walt. Former financial analyst until his daughter's medical bills outpaced everything he'd saved. I buy him a hot meal first and the jar second, paying him more than he asked for and watching him nearly come apart with relief at the table. On the walk to the cash machine, he keeps glancing at me sideways like he's waiting for the catch. Why trust me with this, he finally asks. I tell him the truth more or less. I'm not trusting the jar. I'm trusting a father who'd sell his last possession for his kid. That's worth more to me than the jar is. He doesn't say anything else the rest of the walk, but something in his posture changes, straighter, steadier, like a decision just got made somewhere behind his ribs. That night, an unfinished apartment block at the far edge of the district draws me in with a faint pull I can't quite name, worm sight tugging at the edge of my awareness before I even see the source. I climb to the second floor and find a rift built from what looks like an old worm-eaten beam, radiating a strange, heavy stillness. Rift 1748. Bound coordinate, the cradle of coil. The shape must answer the will. The will must answer the heart. But how does one forge devotion out of something that cannot be touched? I seek a single blank page to give shape to an unbreakable bond. I read it 3 times and get nowhere. I pull out my phone and start digging through old folklore searches instead, and slowly the riddle starts to loosen. Shape answering will is loyalty, following without hesitation. Devotion given physical form out of something intangible is a contract, but not a contract that can be torn up for the right price, because that isn't real loyalty, that's just leverage. A blank page meant to hold something unbreakable. I think about every story I've ever heard about family lines, ancestral tablets, names carved into wood and kept on a shelf for generations because the wood itself becomes a kind of anchor. A family registry is just paper. An ancestral marker is just a carved plank. And yet to the people who keep them, that paper and that plank carry more weight than anything money can buy. I don't have a family registry. My parents are gone, and what little extended family I had stopped returning my calls the week after the funeral. This rift, on paper, is a dead end for someone like me. Then I start laughing, quiet and a little unhinged, alone in an abandoned building at midnight. If I don't have a bloodline, then starting tonight, I'll build one from scratch. I find a splintered shelf board nearby, snap off the cleanest section, bite my own fingertip, and write a single word across the grain in blood. Foster. The plank shudders the instant I finish the last letter, and I feel something settle into place between me and it, faint but undeniable. I carry it to the center of the rift and press it flat against the surface. The world goes silent around me. Then drums I can't physically hear start pounding somewhere behind my eyes, and I'm somewhere else entirely, an ancient gathering of figures offering up devotion, sacrifice, song, every kind of loyalty a person could give freely. A voice cuts through all of it, mocking, "Look at this, it's a real devotion. Willing sacrifice. And you, mortal, dare to claim you're founding something of your own?" Pressure slams into my skull hard enough to blur my vision. I can feel something crawling up my arm in the half-formed dark, but I can't move to stop it. The kitchen knife in my pocket pulses with a faint heat against my leg. My voice comes out steadier than I feel. "Your traditions are the echo of a dead age," I tell it. "I'm the start of a new one. I am the rule now." The vision shatters all at once. Sweat soaks through my shirt. I'm shaking when I come back to myself, but the rift in front of me has gone still and quiet, defeated rather than destroyed. The old beam collapses into a fine dust that swirls upward and reforms into a dark green-black shell hovering above where the rift used to be. Heart of the first coil. Grade, Mythic. Continuously draws ambient energy and produces a fresh devotion-bound spark roughly every 2 weeks. Function 2, can store and fuse loyalty-type items. Another mythic item, and a slow but renewable one at that. I notice 2 smaller shapes drifting near it, one larger, one tiny, both pulsing faintly red, orbiting each other like a planet and its moon. Binding ember, mother and child. Grade, Legendary. The mother ember bonds into the user's own body. The child ember bonds into a target soul. While bonded, the child's host remains absolutely loyal to the mother's host. Any hint of betrayal allows the mother's host to instantly destroy the child's host. I think of Walt immediately, then talk myself out of it just as fast. This is too sharp an edge to waste on an ordinary man who's already proven himself loyal the hard way, through trust freely given rather than forced. Good steel gets saved for the moment it actually matters. I pack everything away and head back into the night, already thinking through the next few days. By the time I get home, the sky has gone the deep amber orange of late summer evening, and the smell of fresh bread drifts out of a corner bakery, stopping me mid-stride. I look up and realize, with a small jolt, that the Hollow Moon Festival is 2 days out, the one holiday of the year built entirely around reunions, the one my parents used to make a production out of every single year without fail. I buy a few honey cakes on instinct and bite into one walking home, and the familiar taste makes my eyes sting in a way I don't examine too closely. My smile freezes a beat later as a thought surfaces from nowhere, a half-remembered detail from a strange tip I picked up off a gossip-hungry vending machine riff days ago, something about restless artists rehearsing their final performance. Could it land on the festival itself? Before I can chase that thought further, a low, mournful voice drifts toward me on the evening wind, 3 voices actually, woven together in something between a song and a wail. I follow it instinctively, weapon already in hand, until I push through a stretch of overgrown grass and find an abandoned outdoor amphitheater, empty seats stretching back into darkness, the air thick with something that feels like a held breath. Wormsight strips away the stage's disguise the moment I focus on it, revealing 3 separate rifts arranged across the platform, left, center, right. The left rift is built from broken spears and rusted armor plate. Rift 101. Bound coordinate, the hull of the wrong general. Why does loyalty always end in suspicion? Why do the faithful always meet the worst ends? The center rift is woven from pearl combs and torn silk. Rift 100,003. Bound coordinate, the drowned bride's chamber. Why did I give everything I had to a man's ambition, only to die utterly alone? The right rift is built entirely from cracked theater masks, dozens of them, every expression imaginable. Rift 104. Bound coordinate, the hollow fool's stage. It laughs at the ones who rise. It laughs at the ones who fall. It laughs because it's decided the whole world is made of fools. A general, a bride, a fool, 3 roles locked in unfinished tragedy with no resolution in sight. I stand there a long moment before the missing piece becomes obvious. A story like this needs a 4th role to actually mean anything. Someone willing to step in and pass judgment, someone who calls the wrong thing wrong without flinching. I think of every story my father ever told me about doing the right thing even when it cost him everything, and how none of that loyalty ever protected either of my parents from whatever finally killed them. Grief I've been swallowing for a year claws its way up all at once. If this stage needs a judge, then I'll be the judge. I step up onto the platform and the air seems to hold its breath with me. General, I call out toward the left rift, voice ringing harder off the empty seats than I expect. What did you actually do wrong? The wrong was the fool on the throne who listened to liars. Your brothers are dead and you're still sitting here mourning instead of demanding justice for them. Is that what a general does? There's no melody in what I'm saying, just pure accusation, but the rift shudders like it's been struck. I drop to one knee and slam my fist into the stage boards, and the spear and armor rift cracks apart, its resentment bleeding out into nothing. I turn to the center rift next, voice softening. Lady, none of this was your fault. The wrong belongs to a man who never deserved a fraction of what you gave him. There are people in this world who'd kill for half the life you had, and you spent it grieving a man who used you as a stepping stone. Your story ends tonight, by my hand, and it ends with you finally being seen. The bride rift's light dims, its grief folding in on itself and going quiet. Then a thin, delighted cackle rises out of the third rift, louder than either of the others combined. Beautifully done, it crows, truly. But it's all theater, isn't it? Your grief is borrowed for the occasion. Your hatred is a costume. You're not a judge at all, you're just another fool who climbed on stage to play dress up. The mockery lands somewhere real, and I feel the first two rifts flicker back toward unrest, like the fool's accusation is dragging their resolution apart again. This isn't writing the story straight. This is an outsider defacing it. Pathetic, the fool's voice continues, delighted with itself. Ignorant. Borrowed sorrow. I press a hand flat against my own chest, and for once my voice doesn't come out steady at all. Sure. Everything up here is scripted, mirrored, performed 1,000 times before I ever stepped on this stage. But what happened to me wasn't scripted by anyone. My hatred is real. My grief is real. Every second of my life since the accident has been 10,000 times more real than anything you've ever staged here. Tonight I make my own body the proof. I drag the kitchen knife across my own palm and press the wound flat against my face, painting a crude, uneven mask in my own blood, not graceful, not theatrical, just true. The pain is sharp and immediate and I let it show on my face instead of hiding it, because that's the whole point. I'm Jonah Foster. I tell the empty seats, the rift, whatever's listening. I'm also whatever this mask makes me. I'm an orphan with no family left to claim me, on the one night of the year built entirely around family. I have grief the heavens never bothered to answer for. Call that fake again. Thunder rolls first out of the general's rift, not a sound exactly, more a pressure wave, all its resentment finally releasing at once. Then the bride's rift collapses, pearl combs and silk dissolving into a cascade of gold light. Last, the fool's rift lets out a long, strange sound that's somehow both laughter and a sob, every cracked mask across its surface dissolving into fine gold dust at once. I barely have time to process any of it before a deep red column of light tears down from somewhere far above the amphitheater, cutting straight through all three streams of gold like a spear through paper. 3 separate threads of memory pour into my skull at once. The general planting flowers over a mass grave after his death, the bride finally ascending to rule in her own right, the fool pulling off its own mask to weep, just once, for a stranger it never even knew. My knees buckle from the strain and I drop hard onto the stage floor, vision swimming. I pull a fresh bottle of nectar from the hoard pocket and force it down, and the rush of vitality drags me back upright fast enough that I can finally take stock of the 3 glowing rewards floating where the rifts used to stand. I walk to the general's platform first. Tyrant's Crown. Series item, the general. Grade, legendary. Function 1, the stronger your vitality, the heavier your presence. Scales damage dealt and damage resisted accordingly. Function 2, when outnumbered 3-1 or worse by enemies of equal or higher grade, the crown's effect intensifies with every additional opponent. I move to the bride's platform next. A jade pendant rests there, colors shifting faintly. Pendant of the Spared. Series item, the bride. Grade, legendary. Function, any single target attack aimed at the wearer has a chance to redirect onto a random nearby target instead. That one makes me laugh under my breath. Every assassin's nightmare, wrapped in jewelry. Last, I approach the cracked mask still glowing faintly on the fool's platform. If this clown hadn't pushed me as hard as it did at the very end, I'd never have painted my own face tonight. In a strange way, it built me as much as it mocked me. I lift a dark red mask fragment off the platform. Reflected spite. Series item, the Fool. Grade, legendary. Function 1, when struck by a negative effect, chance to reflect a portion of it back at the source. Function 2, chance to deflect status effects entirely. 3 legendary grade pieces in one night feels like more wealth than I know how to hold. Then I lift my eyes toward the center of the stage, exactly where the red light tore down from above, and find a single thin sheet of fabric resting there, light as a held breath, painted in the rough shape of a face. Visage of the Arbiter. Series item, the Judge. Grade, Mythic. Function, anyone who meets the wearer's gaze while it's worn feels true fear and loses the will to fight. I sit back on my heels and let myself laugh, quiet and stunned, at the moon overhead. A full set, series bound, probably 7 pieces if it follows the same pattern as everything else tonight. If a complete legendary and mythic set like this exists, the rest of it is sitting out there somewhere, waiting on the right person to walk through the right door. The riddle from the gossip-hungry vending machine finally clicks into full focus. Artists growing impatient, rehearsing a final performance, especially him, wanting to meet me. The drowned stage rift, the one tied to the leading lady, the one whose curse I helped end the very first night this all began. That theater is connected to all of this. A single sprawling production I've apparently been performing in without knowing it, one act at a time. Tomorrow is the night of the festival. Final rehearsal isn't a metaphor. It's a warning. I gather the new items into the hoard pocket alongside the Cinderfang egg, the loyalty ember, the drakefang, all of it. I run a hand over the egg, still nuzzling lazily against my palm even half asleep, and over the dark hilt of the knife that started feeling more like an extension of my arm than a tool. Egg, blade, ember, 3 threads of one growing thing. My phone buzzes. Walt's name on the screen. Mr. Foster, his voice says, careful and a little shaky with hope, thank you for everything. My daughter's first round of tests came back better than we expected. I wanted to ask, my wife and I pulled 2 more items today, both worthless, white grade. I know they're nothing, but if you still want them. His voice trails off at the end like he expects to be told no. I tell him I'll buy them, that we'll meet tomorrow, and something in his exhale on the other end sounds like a man putting a weight down for the first time in a long time. After we hang up, I think through the shape of what's actually building around me. A recycling operation for everything the world calls trash, a growing stockpile of legendary and mythic items, a hatchling slowly waking up inside an egg fed on borrowed power, and somewhere out there, a woman who escaped me twice already and an organization apparently watching my every move with more patience than I'm comfortable with. I dial Walt back before sleep can catch up with me. One more thing, I tell him. There's an underground crew sniffing around anyone trading rift fragments at scale. If they reach out to you, take the offer. Get inside. I'll cover you the whole way. There's a long pause on the line, the sound of a man weighing exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes before answering. Whatever you need, he finally says. I owe you more than I can ever pay back. This is the least I can do. I hang up and sit alone in the quiet of the bottling plant, syrup lines humming faintly in the dark below me, an egg with a heart-shaped tail asleep against my chest. Outside, the sky over the city has gone that same bruised violet color from the very first night, and somewhere underneath all of it, the festival is 2 days from its final rehearsal, and I have absolutely no intention of missing my cue. I sleep harder than I expect to, and the dream that finds me is a strange one. I'm standing in an endless syrup line, conveyor belts stretching past the horizon in both directions, and somewhere behind me something vast and patient is humming a tune that sounds almost like a jingle. A voice that isn't quite a voice at all murmurs, half amused, bro, what kind of dragon survives on cheap soda? I wake up laughing before the sentence even finishes, because apparently the fizzing hollow has opinions about its own diet now too. I head down to the cellar before breakfast and toss in a few extra sparks just to keep the peace. A son doesn't complain about a humble table, I tell it, half serious, and you should be grateful you get fed at all. It seems to accept the bribe, swallowing the offering noticeably faster than usual, which I choose to interpret as gratitude rather than greed. The egg's progress has stalled at 54% overnight. Refusing the bottle of nectar, I offer it outright, flicking its little half-formed tail at the glass like the suggestion personally offends it. Apparently my dragon has standards. The only path forward from here is the same one that's worked every time so far. Feed it what it actually wants, one calamity at a time. I call Halloway's old supplier contact for more raw stock, mostly as cover, and spend the rest of the morning running bottling lines while I plan my route for the night. Tomorrow is the festival. Whatever the gossip rift meant about a final rehearsal, I have a feeling I'm not going to get a quiet evening to enjoy it. Out past the edge of the district, where the warehouses give way to empty lots, a single rusted vending machine sits alone at a dead bus stop, somehow untouched by the rain or the rust eating everything else around it. The number stenciled across its coin slot reads differently every time I glance at it, which is usually a sign something's worth a closer look. Rift 52,818. Bound coordinate, the whispering machine. Addicted to secrets. Starving for gossip nobody else has heard yet. I almost laugh out loud. Even rifts apparently have a sense of humor about their own cravings. I don't have a literal secret to hand it, so I dig out a receipt from my back pocket, the withdrawal slip from when I paid Walt for the jar, proof of one stranger helping another for no reason except that it was the right thing to do, and slide it into the coin return. The machine lets out a low, delighted hum. A black, slightly antique-looking envelope slides out of the dispenser slot, and I grab it before the wind can take it. Inside, the page is blank for a long moment before gold script crawls across it on its own. I do love good gossip. In trade, 2 secrets. First, the gray rain isn't weather. It's the tears of a hero, still grieving something none of you were ever meant to witness. Second, the artists grow restless. Final rehearsal approaches. Especially him. He very much wants to meet you. My stomach drops reading the second line again. Singular. I press worm sight against the words as hard as I can manage, trying to dig past the riddle into something concrete, and get nothing back but silence. Whatever this is, it's outside what my ability can currently parse. The envelope dissolves into gold dust before I can ask it anything else, scattering on the wind and leaving me alone at an empty bus stop with more questions than I walked in with. I head back toward the plant, already running through everything I know, the drown stage rift tied to a leading lady I helped free on the very first night, the 3-part theater I closed out tonight, the festival arriving tomorrow under a name that's apparently always meant reunion. Whatever's rehearsing, it's been building toward this since before I even knew rifts existed. I call Halloway's supplier one more time and double the order, just in case tomorrow turns into the kind of night where I don't get to stop and restock. Then I head down to the cellar, feed the hollow one last time before bed, and lie awake longer than I mean to, staring at the ceiling, running my thumb along the dark hilt of the knife resting on the nightstand. Somewhere out past the city limits, in a mansion none of the news cameras have ever filmed, a woman with bandages wound tight around both forearms listens to Mia recount the same humiliating story for the 3rd time, growing less patient with every retelling. You let some nobody flatten an entire security detail and you're standing here, the woman finally snaps, instead of finding out who he actually is. In a command center that doesn't officially exist, a man flips through a thin personnel file with my photograph clipped to the front page, reading through clean academic records and an unremarkable employment history right up until the very last page, where everything changes. He stops on a line reading parents, deceased, cause of death listed as accidental, and beneath it, in smaller print, a half-dozen notes about witnesses who recanted, evidence that went missing, a junior investigator who pushed too hard and ended up dead within the month. The man closes the file slowly and sets it down like it weighs more than it should. Put everything regarding Foster on hold, he tells the room. Until we understand what actually happened to his family, we make no moves. We don't know yet if we're looking at a threat or at someone the world already failed once. None of that reaches me either. I fall asleep with the egg curled against my side, the knife within reach, and the festival exactly one sunrise away. I wake before the alarm even bothers, the kind of wide awake that comes from a body that already knows today isn't a normal one. The egg is warm against my ribs, and when I check it, the heart-shaped markings along its shell have spread another inch overnight. Hatching progress, 58%. Closer, but not close enough for whatever's coming tonight. I feed the hollow its morning sparks, run a double batch through the bottling line as cover, and check the forums while the machines hum. The top story isn't about rifts at all for once. It's a government broadcast, repeated across every channel. Effective immediately, the broadcast reads, citizens are invited to apply for the WIRM Warden program. Anyone demonstrating sufficient rift-bonded capability may be recruited into supervised civil response units. In addition, the state will purchase rift shards without limit, no questions asked, at a fixed rate per unit. Rift shards? I haven't seen the term before, but I know exactly what it means the second I picture the dull fragments I've been tossing into my hoard pocket without a second thought every time a calamity goes down. I check one with worm sight out of curiosity. Rift shard. Grade, variable. Inert remnant left behind when a calamity tied to a rift is destroyed. Purpose unknown to current science. High demand among collectors and institutions alike. I've got 11 of them sitting in storage already, and tonight is shaping up to be the kind of night that produces a lot more. The government wants them badly enough to advertise an open checkbook, which tells me they're either more valuable than anyone said publicly, or more dangerous, or both. I file the thought away and turn my attention to the more immediate problem, Walt's daughter, and the promise I made him 2 days ago. I call him before noon. We meet at the hospital instead of his apartment this time, and the change in him is visible from the elevator doors, shoulders set differently, eyes clearer, a man who started believing in tomorrow again instead of just enduring it. His daughter, Nora, is sitting up in bed when we walk in, paler than a 6-year-old should be but smiling the second she sees her father's face. The doctor on duty pulls Walt and his wife aside in the hallway, voice low and careful in the specific way doctors get when they're trying not to promise something they can't guarantee. The marrow's responding better than we projected, he tells them, quietly stunned. Whatever you gave her, I'm not going to ask, but keep giving it to her. I hand Walt a fresh bottle from the hoard pocket, the refined nectar from the Fizzing Hollow's uncommon batch. Watch his hands shake as he uncaps it for his daughter. She drinks it without complaint, the way kids do when they've stopped being afraid of medicine because nothing about being sick has ever actually scared them as much as it scares the adults around them. Color floods back into her cheeks within minutes, brighter than it did the first time. Uncle Jonah, she says afterward, tugging my sleeve while her parents are distracted wiping their eyes, are you a wizard? Something like that, I tell her, and she seems satisfied with the answer in the uncomplicated way only a 6-year-old can be. Out in the hallway, Walt finally manages words again. I don't know how to repay this, he says, voice cracking. I tell him the truth, he already started repaying it the moment he agreed to walk into a crew that might get him killed, purely on the strength of one stranger's word. That's not a debt anymore. That's a partnership. His phone buzzes while we're talking. He checks it, and something tightens behind his eyes. The ash in hand, he says quietly. They want me at a logistics warehouse in the East District tonight. Orientation, they're calling it. East District. My mind runs the geography automatically, close to the docks, far enough from anything official that nobody asks questions about late-night truck traffic. I tell him to go, to keep his head down, to remember nothing he sees there is worth dying over, and that I'll be close by whether he can see me or not. He nods, steadier than I expect, and heads back to his daughter's room for a few more hours before the night swallows him whole. By late afternoon the sky has started doing something it has no business doing. The sun sets on schedule, full and orange, but instead of fading into a normal dusk, the disk of the moon rising behind it bleeds slowly from white to a deep, arterial red, like something underneath the surface of the world finally stopped holding its breath. Within minutes every screen in the city is showing the same thing. The forums detonate. Half the posts are panic. The other half, predictably, are gamblers theorizing that a blood-red moon means doubled rewards, an event window too good to pass up. I step outside and find the nearest rift just to see what's actually changed. It used to look like an old vending machine, scavenged metal and dead wiring. Now it pulses with a sick crimson light that wasn't there this morning. I read it. Rift 20,247. Bound coordinate, the Wasteland Exchange. Ember moon condition, offerings remaining, 10. Reward concealed from all observers until claimed. 10 total offerings before the rift either empties out or shatters, and whatever comes out of it is hidden in a haze the moment it appears. Nobody watching can tell whether the person standing there just won the lottery or walked away with a worthless rock. I stand there for a second letting the implications settle. Under cover of an event the entire city is panicking over, I could clear a red tier reward in the middle of a crowded street and not a single person would be able to tell. I move fast, working 2 more rifts before the offering counts run dry. One yields a long, narrow blade sharp enough to shear through steel without losing its edge, more useful as raw material for the hollow than as a weapon I'll ever carry alongside the Drakefang. The other gives up a set of shoulder guards humming with barely contained power, the kind of item that trades a short, devastating burst of strength for a crash afterward that leaves the wearer helpless. Both go straight into my collection, slated for conversion later. Then my phone lights up with an emergency broadcast, the kind designed to override every other notification on the device. Official notice: during Ember Moon events, dormant rifts may mutate. Citizens are advised to remain indoors. WRM wardens and authorized response units are being deployed citywide. Civilian sacrificers may assist disaster response at their own risk. I finally understand the shape of the whole mechanic. Every rift that doesn't reach its quota before dawn gets forcibly unlocked from the inside, and what comes out isn't a blessing. It's whatever calamity that Rift's bound coordinate has been quietly nursing this entire time. After everything I've already survived, the Wraith, the Queen of the Velvet Court, the general's rift. My confidence is high, and the egg against my ribs is closer to hatching than it's ever been. These calamities are exactly the meal it's been holding out for. I head out the door into a city already losing its nerve. The first kill comes easy, a hooded figure crouched over a half-collapsed rift, too slow, too disoriented by its own new existence to register me closing in from behind until the Drakefang's already done its work. The figure dissolves into black mist with a short, surprised shriek, and a small glowing fragment drops onto the pavement where it stood. Rift shard. I pocket it and check the Drakefang's growth meter. It ticks upward fast, faster than chickens or pigs ever managed, fast enough that the math becomes obvious within a few more kills. This is, functionally, a once-a-cycle leveling event, and I intend to make the absolute most of it. I clear 3 more low-grade calamities in quick succession, something resembling a scarecrow stitched from old advertisement banners, a swarm of wire-thin shapes that used to be pigeons, a hunched shape that might once have been human before whatever rift claimed it finished the job. None of them put up a real fight. Each one feeds the egg a little more, and each one nudges the Drakefang's progress bar closer to whatever threshold comes next. I'm 3 blocks deeper into the chaos when something genuinely different crosses my path, armored, deliberate, moving with the kind of awareness that says elite rather than common. I read it on instinct. Bone Warden. Calamity, elite grade. Mechanic, damage reflective plating activates on contact. Elite means it has rules instead of just raw aggression, and I find out the hard way exactly what those rules are when my first strike rebounds off its plating and nearly takes my own arm off at the elbow. I back off, circle, watch the way the plating flares red right before it activates, and time my next strike for the half-second gap immediately after the flare fades. The Drakefang punches straight through unguarded ribs this time, and the thing drops in a heap, dissolving into the same black mist as everything else. I'm wiping sweat off my forehead, more impressed with myself than I probably should be, when a familiar low hum rolls up through my chest from somewhere underground. The fizzing hollow, 3 miles away, is apparently agitated about something. I don't have time to chase that thread yet. The night's still young, and there's a whole city full of unlocked calamities still waiting to be turned into experience. Party off. 3 streets over, a brother and sister are cornered behind an overturned delivery cart, a wire pigeon swarm circling close enough that the boy's already raised a length of rebar, ready to buy his sister a few extra seconds with his own body if it comes to that. I close the distance faster than either of them can track and put the swarm down before the boy even finishes his swing, leaving him standing there mid-motion, blinking at empty air where a death was supposed to happen. Get inside, somewhere with walls, I tell them, and they don't need to be told twice. A few blocks further on, a WIRM warden squad is dug into a choke point between 2 buildings, holding a line against something I can't quite see yet from this angle. Their captain is shouting orders over the noise, voice hoarse with the specific exhaustion of someone who's been fighting for hours straight. I don't get involved. Government units and unregistered sacrificers operating in the same 3 feet of pavement is a great way to get shot by your own side, and instead swing wide around them, hunting my own targets in the quieter side streets where the wardens haven't reached yet. I clear a dozen more common-grade calamities over the next 2 hours. Each kill ticks the Drakefang's growth a little higher, the egg's hatching percentage climbing in smaller and smaller increments the closer it gets to whatever threshold finishes the process. By the time I check my phone again, it's well past 2 in the morning, and the egg sits at 91%. I'm circling back toward the bottling plant to drop off the accumulated haul of rift shards when the ground itself starts to feel wrong underfoot, a low vibration that has nothing to do with traffic or construction, building steadily as I get closer to the old warehouse district near the plant. I follow it on instinct, worm sight pulling taut at the edge of my senses the way it does right before something significant. I find the source behind a collapsed loading dock, a sprawling orchard of dead, twisted fruit trees that has no business existing in the middle of an industrial district, every branch hung with fruit the deep, wrong red of the moon overhead. At the center of it stands what used to be a person, hunched, robes fused into bark, a single weeping eye embedded in the trunk where a face should be. Worm sight strains against it, the text resolving slower than usual, like the thing itself is resisting the read. Rift coordinate code corrupted. Bound location, the sour root. Once tasked with tending the orchard that fed a sleeping god, the vintner was abandoned when its god went silent. It has spent centuries cultivating fruit for a mouth that will never again open to eat it. Tonight, it has decided to stop waiting, and to feed something newer instead, something it calls the bitter air. A corrupted, mutated rift, exactly the kind tonight's broadcast warned about. The pressure radiating off it is heavier than anything I have fought so far, heavier even than the wraith from 2 nights ago. I should probably retreat and report this to the nearest warden squad. Instead, I find myself flexing my grip on the Drakefang, because something in me has already decided this is exactly the kind of meal the egg has been waiting all night for. The vintner notices me before I've finished deciding. Its single eye rolls toward me with a wet, grinding sound, and every branch in the orchard shudders at once, red fruit splitting open to reveal rows of needle-thin thorns where seeds should be. I don't wait for the opening volley. I detonate vitality through my legs and throw myself sideways the instant the first wave of thorn fruit launches, feeling several graze close enough to draw blood through my jacket sleeve. The hourglass screams a warning a half-second before a root the thickness of my torso erupts from the broken pavement directly under where I'd have landed if I hadn't already adjusted midair. I circle wide, looking for an opening, and the vintner answers by uprooting itself entirely, dragging half the orchard's root system up out of the ground with it, transforming the whole battlefield into a writhing maze of red-black wood. A whip-thin branch catches my shoulder before I can fully dodge, and where it connects, the skin underneath starts blackening at the edges, spreading slow and cold even as the hollow's accumulated vitality in my blood fights to burn the corruption back. This is bad in a way the wraith never was. I grit through it, force the spreading rot back to a stalemate through sheer accumulated nectar, and reach for the jar in my jacket, Walt's old vessel, still half full of stored gray rain from the storm 2 nights ago. I uncap it and fling the contents at the nearest mass of roots closing in on me. The effect is immediate and absolute. Everywhere the gray rain touches, the wood simply stops being alive, crumbling to ash on contact, the corruption unraveling like a thread pulled loose. The vintner's single eye goes wide with something that might be the closest thing it has left to panic. It doesn't understand what just happened to it, and that confusion buys me exactly the window I need. I push through the gap the rain carved open, weaving between the remaining roots, the jar emptying fast as I clear a path toward the trunk. 20 feet. 10. The vintner gathers everything it has left into one final desperate strike, a black-veined branch screaming toward my chest faster than anything it's thrown yet, and the hourglass shows me nothing but red, a warning with no time left to act on. The last spark of warmth in my pocket is already in my hand before I consciously decide to use it. I strike it against my palm and hurl it directly into the branch's path. Fire meets rot at the worst possible angle for the rot, and the resulting blast halts the strike just long enough, just barely long enough. I close the last 10 feet at a dead sprint, the Drakefang already singing with black mist, and drive it straight through the weeping eye at the center of the trunk. It doesn't scream so much as exhale, one long, exhausted breath, centuries of waiting finally over. The whole orchard collapses inward at once, dissolving into a column of black light that punches straight up through the cloud cover, visible, I'd guess, from half the city. I'm thrown backward by the shockwave, skidding across broken pavement, every inch of me bruised, bleeding, and grinning like an idiot, because I won. I survived an elite-grade calamity that was clearly never meant for someone at my stage, and I'm still standing. 2 items glow faintly where the orchard used to be. The first is a fist-sized black seed, warm to the touch. Heart of the sour root. Grade, epic. Can permanently fuse with any active rift, transforming its nature. Forcible removal after binding destroys the heart. Consumable, once used, it's gone. Exactly what I came hoping for, though I didn't dare assume I'd actually get it. The second item is a thin strip of bark that somehow fused itself into the texture of skin. Mark of the Hollow Orchard. Grade, legendary. Branding the soul with rot-touched resistance. Grants significant affinity with and resistance to corrupting and decaying forces. I'm reaching for it when an additional line of text crawls into view beneath the description, slower, heavier, like it costs the rift something to write. You have drawn the attention of something the vintner served for centuries. It has been asleep a long time. It is curious whether you're worth waking up for. A cold weight settles in my stomach that has nothing to do with my injuries. I look up at the black pillar still towering over the district and decide, very quickly, that whatever just noticed me deserves to wait. I pocket both items and limp toward the plant, ready to put real distance between myself and whatever's stirring out there in the dark. I make it 3 blocks before I sense it, the same flat, attentive stillness from 2 nights ago, someone watching from a distance with far more discipline than panic or curiosity would explain. I don't bolt this time. Whoever this is, government or otherwise, running just confirms I have something worth chasing. I slow down instead, deliberately, and speak into the dark without turning around. You can stop circling. I already know you're there. A long pause answers me, long enough that I start to wonder if I imagine the whole thing. Then a figure steps out from behind a transformer box. Not the same scout from before, someone new, a woman in dark tactical gear with both hands visibly empty, held slightly away from her body. Non-threatening posture, deliberately so. I'm not here to fight you, she says. Commander Vane sent me ahead. He wants 5 minutes, unarmed, before the sun comes up. I weigh it for a second. Wormsight tells me nothing about her, no rift-bound item registers on her at all, which either means she's carrying nothing enhanced, or she's good enough to be carrying something I genuinely can't read. 5 minutes, I tell her. Where? She leads me 2 blocks over to a parked SUV with its interior lights off, engine idling. The man waiting beside it matches the file Walt's eventual handlers would later describe to me almost word for word, hard-faced, exhausted in the specific way that comes from a job that never lets you stop being exhausted, eyes that catalog everything about me in the first 3 seconds without making it obvious he's doing it. Mr. Foster, he says, and the fact that he already has my name lands harder than I expect. I'm not here to detain you. I'm here because 2 nights ago you took down a Bone Warden solo, and tonight you apparently soloed something my best response team would have needed 12 people to survive. I want to know whose side that puts you on. I tell him the truth, mostly, because lying to someone who clearly already has my file feels like a wasted effort. My own side. But my own side happens to currently be at war with an organization called the Ashen Hand, and from what I understand, your agency's been circling that same name for a while without making much progress. Something shifts behind his eyes at that. Recognition, maybe relief, maybe both. We've been trying to get someone inside their structure for over a year, he admits. Every operative we've sent in either goes dark or comes back with nothing usable. I think of Walt, currently somewhere in an East District warehouse, walking voluntarily into the exact organization this man's been failing to crack for a year. I have someone inside already, I tell him. Tonight. If you've got resources sitting idle, now would be a good time to use them. Vane studies me for a long moment, weighing something I can't fully read. My agency dug into your parents' case 6 months before you ever offered your first thing to a rift, he says finally, quiet enough that the words land harder than a shout would have. We never closed it. Whoever buried it had real reach. If the Ashen Hand's leadership is who I think it is, there's a decent chance the same people who buried your parents' case are sitting at the top of that organization right now. The ground tilts slightly under me, in a way that has nothing to do with the night's injuries. A year of silence and dead ends, and the answer might have been one phone call away the entire time, if either of us had known to make it. Tonight, I tell him, voice steadier than I feel. We hit them together. I have a man inside, items that can level a building, and a reason that's been 7 years overdue. What do you have? A full response squad, Vane says, already reaching for the radio clipped to his shoulder, and apparently, the missing piece I didn't know I needed either. The East District warehouse turns out to be exactly as unremarkable as good cover always is. Corrugated steel, loading bays, a logistics company name on the sign that probably hasn't shipped a legitimate package in years. Vane's squad sets up a perimeter 2 blocks out while I go in the way Walt's been going in all week, through the front, unarmed looking, carrying a clipboard like I belong there. Inside, the warehouse floor is stacked with crates that definitely aren't holding produce. I spot Walt near the back, sorting inventory alongside 2 other recruits, and the look that crosses his face when he clocks me is pure controlled panic. I give him the smallest possible nod, the one we agreed on 2 nights ago, meaning move toward the exit when it starts, and keep walking like I have business elsewhere. I find that business fast. A side office, door cracked open, voices inside arguing about a shipment that's running behind schedule. I recognize one of the voices before I even see the face attached to it. Mia, her tone sharper and more confident than it was on the street 2 nights ago, clearly comfortable in a role that lets her give orders instead of taking them. The shipment's not the problem. A second voice says, lower, controlled, unmistakably the woman from the storage yard fight, the one who escaped me twice already. We have a bigger one. Someone's been feeding the wardens information about our routes. I want to know who before tonight's done. I step into the doorway before either of them can finish the thought. Both women go still. Mia's face cycles through several emotions in under a second. Confusion, recognition, and then something close to genuine fear, the kind that wasn't there 2 nights ago when she still believed I was beneath her notice. The other woman doesn't flinch at all. She studies me with the calm, assessing patience of someone who's already decided how this conversation is going to go, regardless of what either of us says next. You're the one from the storage yard, she says. I wondered when you'd find your way to me directly instead of stumbling into my people by accident. Lady Vesper, I assume, I say, because the title fits the way she carries herself, and her eyebrow lifts slightly, the closest thing to surprise she's shown yet. You run this whole operation. Which means you're also the one who's been having my old contacts followed, the one whose people put a blade in my back 2 nights ago. We have a lot to talk about. She tilts her head, unreadable. Or, she says, we skipped the talking part entirely. The first attack comes faster than I expect, a knife aimed at a gap in my guard with the same eerie precision the storage yard fight showed me, except this time the hourglass keeps every motion legible, and I read the strike a half second before it commits, sliding aside instead of taking the hit. She recovers instantly, no wasted motion, clearly more dangerous than the brief skirmish 2 nights ago led on. Mia, to her credit or her cowardice, doesn't join the fight at all. She backs toward the far wall, eyes wide, watching the 2 of us trade blows like she's just now understanding the actual scale of the world she clawed her way into. Vesper is fast, faster than anything I've fought tonight including the Vintner, but speed without the hourglass's perception is still a losing trade against someone who can see the next 3 moves before they happen. I land a clean strike across her shoulder, and instead of the blood-mist escape I'm braced for, she actually staggers, surprised that the hit landed at all. That's new, she mutters, almost admiring, right before I close the distance and pin the fight in close where her speed matters less and the Drakefang's reach matters more. She tries the escape trick a 3rd time, body already starting to dissolve at the edges into red mist, and this time I'm ready for it. Wormsight flags the exact instant the technique triggers, a half-second window where her body is neither solid nor gone, and I drive the Drakefang through that gap before the mist can finish forming. The blade connects with something solid underneath the dissolving edges, and the technique collapses entirely, her whole body snapping back to full solidity with a gasp of genuine pain. She drops to one knee, breathing hard, blood mist trick spent and her main advantage gone with it. For the first time since I've known of her, she looks less like an untouchable predator and more like exactly what she is, a person, badly hurt, finally caught. Before either of us says anything else, the warehouse doors blow open at the far end, Vane's squad moving in fast and coordinated, the sound of the operation collapsing rippling through the building floor by floor. I hear Walt's voice somewhere in the chaos, shouting directions to the other recruits, herding them toward the exit instead of toward the fighting. Vesper looks at the chaos spreading through her own operation with something that isn't quite despair, more like exhaustion, the specific kind that comes from running an organization built entirely on threats finally crumbling under its own weight. You don't actually want to kill me, she says, quiet, almost curious. You want answers. I can see it on you. She's right, and the admission frustrates me more than her earlier mockery did. I lower the Drakefang an inch, not enough to give her an opening, just enough to make the offer real. Took fast, I tell her. Vesper doesn't waste the opening. The ashen hand was never mine, she says, voice tight with effort. I run the street level. The actual leadership sits 3 layers above me, people who never set foot anywhere a camera or a warden could find them. They've been harvesting rift items for years through people like Mia, people desperate enough not to ask questions about where the profits actually go. Your parents, she adds, watching my face carefully as she says it, weren't rift casualties. They were a problem the leadership solved before any of this ever started. Whatever your father saw on that overseas operation, whatever your mother helped someone survive, it threatened something the people above me have been protecting for a long time. The rifts didn't create that secret. They just made it easier to bury other bodies under the chaos. The words land like a physical blow, worse somehow than the Wraith's claws or the Vintner's rot. A confirmation I've been chasing for a year without ever getting close to, handed to me by an enemy bleeding out on a warehouse floor. Names, I say, voice flat. Give me names. She hesitates, calculating, and I can practically watch her weighing her own survival against whatever protection silence might still buy her. Then something in her posture loosens, like a decision she's been avoiding finally settles. There's a man, she says. Goes by the director. Never uses another name in front of anyone below his rank. He's the one who greenlit the cover-up on your parents' case. He's also the one who's been quietly buying up rift shards from every supplier in the city, including mine, for reasons nobody's been told. Across the warehouse, Vane's voice cuts through the chaos, calling a stand-down as his squad finishes securing the floor. Walt appears in the doorway a moment later, breathing hard but unhurt, relief flooding his face the second he spots me still standing. Vesper watches the wardens fan out to begin processing the warehouse, and something almost like relief crosses her own face too, The specific exhaustion of someone who's been carrying a weight they never wanted and is finally allowed to put it down. I'll talk to your commander, she says. Everything I know about the director, in exchange for not being thrown in a cell built for actual monsters. Mia, still pressed against the far wall, finally finds her voice. Jonah, she says, small and stripped of every ounce of performance from 2 nights ago. I didn't know about any of this. I swear I didn't know. I look at her for a long moment, and the rage I've been carrying since the night she climbed into a stranger's car doesn't flare the way I expect it to. It's smaller than I remember, almost tired. You knew enough, I tell her. You knew exactly what kind of organization handed you green light after green light and never once asked where the money came from. Whatever happens to you next isn't on me anymore. It's on the choices you already made. Vane's people take her into custody alongside the rest of the warehouse staff, and from the look on her face, the version of consequences waiting for her now is going to be a lot less forgiving than anything I could have handed out myself. Vane finds me near the loading bay once the warehouse is fully secured, Vesper sitting under guard nearby, already talking quietly with one of his analysts about names and dates and shipment routes. The director, he says, testing the title out loud like it tastes wrong. We've heard whispers of someone using that name for over a year. Every lead went cold the second we got close. Then let's not let this one go cold, I tell him. Vesper says he's been buying rift shards in bulk. That has to go somewhere. Somebody's building towards something, and I doubt it's charity. Before Vane can answer, the warehouse floor shudders under us, hard enough to rattle the remaining stacked crates. Every head in the building turns toward the source, a side room near the back, the one nobody bothered to clear yet because the inventory manifest listed it as empty storage. We move toward it together, weapons and abilities both ready, and find the door already torn half off its hinges from the inside. Inside, dozens of rift shards are arranged in a careful, deliberate spiral across the floor, clearly mid-ritual when the raid interrupted whoever was running it. At the center of the spiral, a fresh rift has torn itself open, smaller than most, pulsing with the same wrong red as the moon outside. I read it before anyone can stop me. Rift unnumbered. Bound coordinate, unknown. Someone has been forcing fragments together to manufacture an artificial binding. Incomplete. Unstable. Origin, deliberate, not natural. My stomach drops. This isn't a calamity born from neglect or corruption like the vintner. Someone built this on purpose, out of stolen pieces, presumably as some kind of weapon or experiment, and the raid just kicked over the hornet's nest mid-construction. Get everyone out, Vane snaps to his team, and they don't argue. I'm already moving the opposite direction, toward the unstable rift instead of away from it, because Wormsight is screaming something at me that I can't quite parse yet, and ignoring it has never once gone well for me. The egg against my ribs goes suddenly, violently warm. I drop to one knee beside the spiral of shards, and Wormsight resolves the rest of the warning a half-second before the unstable rift fully collapses in on itself. This isn't a calamity waking up. It's a trap, built specifically to detonate the instant anyone with real rift-bonded power got close enough to investigate, a kill switch wired into the director's own stolen inventory, in case the warehouse ever fell. I don't have time to retreat. I do the only thing I can think of fast enough to matter. I pull the Cinderfang egg out of the hoard pocket and press it directly against the heart of the collapsing spiral, the way I've fed it every calamity for the last week, betting everything on the one pattern that's held true since the very first night. It eats what shouldn't be wasted. The egg doesn't just absorb the unstable energy. It detonates with it, shell finally splitting wide open under the strain, and for one terrifying second I genuinely believe I've killed the thing I've been carrying and protecting since the night this all began. Then the light clears. Where the egg used to be, something small and serpentine uncoils itself across the floor, scales the deep black of a held breath shot through with violet veins that pulse faintly in time with my own heartbeat. 2 curling horns. A tail with a familiar heart-shaped tip flicking lazily through the air behind it. It blinks up at me with eyes far too old for something that's existed outside a shell for less than 10 seconds, and the unstable rift behind it has gone completely, permanently dark, every fragment of the trap absorbed and neutralized in the same instant the hatching finished. Cinderfang. Bonded companion. Grade, mythic. Pet. Bond status, permanent, primary. I stare at it for a long moment, kneeling in the wreckage of a sabotaged warehouse, surrounded by wardens slowly creeping back into the room now that the building has stopped shaking. The little dragon studies me right back, head tilted, and then, with absolutely no ceremony whatsoever, climbs up my arm and settles itself around my shoulders like it's been doing this for years instead of seconds. Vane, easing back through the doorway with his weapon still half raised, lowers it slowly when he sees what's perched on me. I've read a lot of classified material this year, he says, voice carefully even. Nothing in any of it prepared me for that. Welcome to the club, I tell him, and for the first time since this entire mess started, I actually mean the small, surprised laugh that follows it. Dawn breaks while Vane's team finishes processing the warehouse, the gray rain easing off right on its usual schedule, washing the last of the night's chaos out of the gutters. I sit on an overturned crate near the loading bay, Cinderfong curled across my shoulders, watching the sky lighten from violet back towards something close to ordinary blue for the first time in over a week. Vesper, under guard but no longer fighting it, sits a short distance away, finally talking freely now that the immediate threat of dying has passed. She gives Vane's analysts everything: supply routes, safe houses, 2 more names beneath the director that nobody in the agency has ever connected to the Ashen Hand before. It isn't redemption, not really, but it's the kind of cooperation that buys a different future than the one she was clearly bracing for an hour ago. Walt finds me while the debrief continues around us, Nora's photo already pulled up on his phone like he can't stop checking it. She's asking when she can meet your dragon, he says, half laughing, half still catching up with the fact that any of this is real. Tell her soon, I say, and mean it. 3 days later, the city has mostly stopped talking about the Ember Moon and started talking about something almost as strange, a coordinated raid that took down half the Ashen Hand's local infrastructure overnight, with no official explanation offered beyond a brief statement crediting an unnamed civilian sacrificer working alongside WIRM Warden Command. Vesper's testimony, combined with the warehouse evidence, hands Vane's agency its first real lead on the director in over a year, a name and a face buried under 3 more layers of shell companies that his team is already tearing through. I get a formal invitation a week later, delivered in person by the same analyst who first scouted me outside the Orchard fight. Not conscription, not detainment, an actual offer. Independent operative status, full discretion over my own movements, resources and information shared in exchange for cooperation on cases that intersect with Rift activity. I read it twice, Cinderfong draped lazily across my lap the whole time, and decide it's a fair trade for a government that, for once, asked instead of demanded. The bottling plant stays mine. Halloway, when he finds out what's been quietly happening under the floor of his old building, takes the news with a level of calm that suggests he'd already half suspected something was off the day he sold it. The fizzing hollow keeps producing, the heart of the sour root fuses cleanly into it within the week, and the refined nectar that comes out the other side starts doing things the early batches never could: faster healing, sharper instincts, a vitality boost that no longer feels like borrowed power so much as something genuinely mine. Walt runs the recycling network openly now, no longer needing the cover of a criminal organization to move product. Just an honest, if unusual trade in items most people still don't know what to do with. Nora visits the plant on weekends, mostly to harass Cinderfong into letting her braid little charms into the soft fur along his spine, which he tolerates with the long-suffering patience of a creature several centuries older than his physical size suggests. The set of legendary and mythic items from the Theater Rift sits mostly unused in the hoard pocket, waiting for whatever comes next, and something always comes next, in a world that cracked open once already and never quite closed all the way back up. Mia's case moves slowly through whatever process the agency uses for people who knew too much and asked too little. I don't follow it closely, because for the first time since the night I got dumped on a street corner under a splitting sky, I genuinely don't need to. Vesper, oddly, becomes something between an informant and a reluctant ally over the following months, feeding Vane's team scraps of intelligence on the director's remaining network in exchange for a quiet, unremarkable life well outside the reach of her former employers. I don't trust her, not fully, not yet. But I understand her a little better than I expected to, and in this particular new world, understanding turns out to be worth almost as much as trust. The mark of rot on my arm fades into something closer to a tattoo than a wound, harmless now that its source is gone. A permanent reminder of the night I underestimated exactly how deep this whole thing actually goes. Whatever woke up out there, curious about me, hasn't reached out again. I have a feeling that's a conversation still waiting somewhere down the road, not a door that's closed for good, but for the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm not dreading whatever opens it. Cinderfong stirs against my shoulder, yawns wide enough to show off a full set of needle teeth, and settles back into the half-doze he seems to prefer most afternoons. Somewhere below us, the fizzing hollow hums on, steady and patient, turning everything the world throws away into something worth keeping. Not bad, I tell him quietly, for a guy who started this whole thing with a can of soda and absolutely nothing else? He doesn't answer, obviously, but I could swear the little flick of his tail looks a lot like agreement. There's one thread I haven't let myself pull on yet, and it's the one that's been sitting at the back of my mind since the gossip rift handed it to me 2 nights before the Ember Moon. Especially him. He very much wants to meet you. I've been telling myself there hasn't been time, which is true, and also a convenient excuse to avoid whatever answer is waiting on the other end of that sentence. A month after the raid, with the city mostly settled back into its new normal and Cinderfong big enough now to ride on my forearm instead of just drape across my shoulders, I finally go looking. I start where the thread first picked up, the Drown Stage Rift, the very first one I closed on the night this all began, the leading lady's curse I lifted with nothing but a scorched photograph and 7 years of accumulated resentment. The rift itself is long gone, dissolved the moment I claimed the memory brand set piece. But Wormsight, when I focus hard enough on the empty patch of pavement where it used to stand, picks up a thread of residual connection I never noticed before, faint, patient, deliberately left for someone to eventually follow. I follow it on foot for the better part of an hour, out past the edge of the city, into a stretch of overgrown parkland nobody's bothered to reclaim since the rifts first fell. The trail ends at an old gazebo, half collapsed, vines threading through what used to be a bandstand. Sitting on the warped steps, waiting like he's had nothing but time to spare, is a man in a faded gray coat that doesn't quite match any decade I can place. No rift glows around him. No item registers when I read him. He simply looks up as I approach, and smiles like an old friend arriving exactly on schedule. "You took your time," he says, voice carrying an odd, layered quality, like more than one person is speaking underneath it. I keep the Drakefang loose in my grip without fully drawing it. "For you." He gestures at the collapsed gazebo around us, almost fond. "I used to be the one who decided whether a story ended in tragedy or mercy," he says. "A long, long time ago, before this world ever needed rifts to remember that lesson. I judged. I weighed. I decided which endings were earned and which were simply cruel. Then I got tired, the way anything does eventually, and I stepped back to see if anyone left behind could learn to do it without me." The visage of the Arbiter, sitting in my hoard pocket alongside the rest of its set, suddenly feels a great deal heavier than it did an hour ago. "You built all of this," I say slowly. The cravings. The whole test. Not alone, and not entirely on purpose," he admits, a flicker of something almost like guilt crossing his face. "The world cracked open because something far older than me finally stirred after a very long sleep. That part isn't mine to take credit or blame for. But once the cracks were already there, I saw an opportunity one hadn't had in centuries. A chance to see what mortals actually do with an honest test. Not who can offer the most. Who can see clearly enough to offer the right thing. I think about every rift I ever walked past without a second glance, every crowd I watched throw fortunes at things that were never going to want fortunes in the first place. You've been grading us, I say. This whole time. Grading is a cold word for it, he says, though he doesn't argue the substance. Call it hoping if you'd rather. I gave the world a chance to remember that the right offering has never been about size. It's about whether you actually bothered to look. And the theater, I press. The general, the bride, the fool. That was a piece of you. The fragment, he confirms. Old griefs I never finished carrying. You didn't just close those rifts, Jonah Foster. You finished a verdict I left unspoken for longer than your whole species has existed. That's rarer than you understand. That's why I wanted to meet the person who did it. I don't have a good response to that, so I ask the question that's actually been sitting under all my hesitation this whole month. Is it over? Says, whatever this is. He considers the question with the patience of someone who's genuinely never been in a hurry. For you, the steepest part is behind you, he says finally. The Ember Moon will return on its own schedule and other tests will come with it, because the thing that cracked the sky open hasn't finished waking up yet, and probably won't for a long while still. But you've already proven the thing I wanted proof of. That's not nothing. That's the whole reason any of this mattered to me. He rises from the gazebo steps, and the gray coat seems to thin at the edges, becoming less solid with every passing second, like he's a held breath about to finally exhale all the way. For what it's worth, he adds, almost gently, your parents would have recognized exactly what you did with that photograph and that knife on the very first night. Not the cruelty in it. The honesty. That's worth more than either of us is likely to say out loud again. He's gone before I can answer, the gazebo around me settling back into ordinary, overgrown silence, Cinderfong shifting restlessly against my arm like even he felt something significant just happened and isn't entirely sure what. I stand there a long while before heading back toward the city, the weight of an old, half-retired judge's approval sitting strangely on my chest. Not quite closure, not quite a new beginning, but something steadier than either. Whatever's still sleeping out there, whatever finally finishes waking up someday, I have a hoard pocket full of mythic-grade proof that I'm not planning to face it unprepared. 3 weeks after that conversation in the gazebo, the director's network finally cracks open all the way. Vane's team, working from Vesper's intelligence and a paper trail of Rift Shard purchases that finally adds up to something traceable, raids a private estate 2 counties over, the kind of property that's been quietly held under 6 different shell names for over a decade. I'm not there for the initial breach. I get the call afterward, Vane's voice tighter than I've ever heard it. "You need to see this yourself," he says, and doesn't elaborate further, which tells me more than an explanation would have. The estate's basement, it turns out, isn't a basement at all. It's a private archive, climate-controlled, shelves of items I recognize instantly by grade even before Wormsight confirms it. Mythic, legendary, dozens of pieces stockpiled over what must have been years, long before the rifts ever fell publicly. Sitting in a sealed case at the center of the room is a single framed photograph that stops me cold the second I see it. My father, in dress uniform, shaking hands with a man whose face has been deliberately scratched out of every copy I've ever seen of that photo before. Here, in this private collection, the scratching never happened. The face is intact. It's not a face I recognize from any news report or agency file. It's ordinary, almost forgettable, the kind of face built specifically to disappear into a crowd. Vane, standing beside me, goes very still when he sees it too. "That's him," he says quietly. "That's the director." And your father shook his hand. The rest of the archive answers the question neither of us asks out loud. My father's old service file, the unredacted version, sits 2 shelves down, and reading through it, the shape of the cover-up finally resolves into something coherent. My father hadn't stumbled onto an enemy secret during that overseas operation. He'd stumbled onto this man, years before any of this had a name, already quietly testing whether rift-adjacent anomalies could be harvested and controlled rather than simply survived. My father reported it through the only channels he trusted. The report never went anywhere it was supposed to. Instead, it went straight back to the very man it was written about. My mother's death folds into the same picture a moment later. Not collateral damage, but a second loose end, because she treated my father in the aftermath and asked one question too many about what exactly he'd seen. I looked down at Cinderfong, sprawled across the floor of the agency's briefing room with the specific boneless confidence of a creature who knows exactly how protected he is, and then at the hoard pocket sitting quiet and patient against whatever's left in it, still carrying a mythic visage built specifically to make the right kind of enemy afraid. I think about a year of silence on my parents' case, finally cracked open because I happened to be the one person in this entire city who could read what a soda craved badly enough to test it. I think about every rift I almost walked past because the reward looked too small to matter. "Slow works fine," I tell him. "I've gotten pretty good at not skipping the parts that look unimportant." The reconnaissance trip takes 3 days, most of it spent quietly cataloging shipping manifests and shell company paperwork in a rented office 2 floors above a laundromat, nothing like the dramatic raids I've gotten used to. On the second night, going through a stack of older invoices nobody flagged as important, I find a line item that makes the whole trip worth it. A recurring shipment, going back nearly 8 years, routed through a private courier under a name I recognize instantly because I grew up watching my father sign for packages addressed exactly that way. A research designation, not a person's name, but one that traces, eventually, 2 more shell layers down, to a private lab registered under yet another dummy company. It isn't the director himself. But it's the first thread in 2 months that doesn't dead-end immediately, and Vane's face when I call it and tells me he understands exactly how rare that is. "Good work," he says, and means it. "We'll build a case around this slowly. No moving until we're certain." I tell him that's fine. I've learned, somewhere over the last 2 months, that the version of justice worth having isn't always the fast, satisfying kind that ends in a single decisive fight. Sometimes it's patient instead, methodical, built one verified document at a time until the structure can't collapse the moment someone with money and reach decides to make it disappear again. I fly home with that thread still loose in my hands, not resolved, not meant to be resolved in a single trip, but real, traceable, the kind of lead that eventually closes a case instead of just postponing the question. Cinderfong meets me at the gate, having apparently convinced Walt to let him ride along in the car the entire way there and back. Judging by the satisfied way, he immediately reclaims his spot draped over my shoulders the second I'm within reach. That evening, back at the bottling plant with the fizzing hollow humming steadily below the floor and Nora's latest charm bracelet still tangled somewhere in Cinderfang's scales, I sit on the loading dock steps and finally let myself feel the full shape of everything that's happened since the night the sky split open. I think about the can of soda, half warm, thrown onto a rift out of nothing but desperation and an empty bank account. I think about every crowd that night throwing in gold and jewels and walking away with garbage, never understanding that the whole game was never about how much you had to give. It was about whether you bothered to actually look at what was being asked of you before you handed it over. My parents never got the chance to see any of this, not the rifts, not the world rebuilding itself one careful offering at a time, not their son finally pulling at the thread that might someday unravel the people who erased them. But somewhere in a half-collapsed gazebo, an old, tired judge told me they'd have recognized exactly what I did with a knife and a photograph on the very first night, and I've decided to let that be enough for now. Not closure. Just enough. The city below the plant settles into an ordinary evening, streetlights flickering on one by one, the sky overhead a calm, unremarkable blue with no trace of violet anywhere in it. Somewhere out there the director is still loose, still careful, still confident that money and distance can keep him 3 shell companies ahead of consequence forever. He's wrong about that, I think, scratching absently behind Cinderfang's horns while the dragon makes a low, contented sound that isn't quite a purr and isn't quite anything else either. He's wrong, and it's only a matter of time before the slow, patient work proves it. For now, though, the hollow needs feeding, Nora's bracelet needs untangling, and somewhere inside the plant a fresh batch of heart fizz is ready to bottle. Tomorrow can carry the rest of the fight. Tonight, for the first time in longer than I can remember, just gets to be quiet. I head back inside, dragon trailing at my heels, and pull the cellar door shut behind us both.